Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Kevin Mehrabi, founder of StableTech and WealthChain. Kevin, for those who might not know, is the creator behind numerous DeFi projects here in the Tezos ecosystem. So many, in fact, that I doubt we're going to have time to get to them all here today. Kevin's here today to talk about, among other things, USD Tez, the Tezos stablecoin designed with US compliance and scalability in mind. On today's stream, we'll be giving away $100 in USD Tez, courtesy of Kevin and his team, to one of our lucky viewers. If you'd like that lucky to be you, and why wouldn't you, keep an ear out for a keyword later on during the stream. And of course, if you have any questions for Kevin that you'd like me to ask, please add them in the chat at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can before we wrap up. Hi, Kevin. How are things in LA?
Wonderful. I don't get to see much of it because I'm inside working most of the time, but weather's nice. Yeah.
Right on. To get us started, can you talk a bit about your professional background and how you got started on your journey into the exciting world of blockchain technology?
Sure. My background is tech entrepreneurship. I went to USC originally actually for film school, but then I added on a business bachelor's because I realized I just wanted to be creative in some way. And my mind was more oriented towards business. So I did a tech venture and early payment startup back in 2007, back when there were no resources, no crypto, nothing to enable that. So I was thinking ahead, but a lot of the hurdles kind of it guided what I wanted to do later on. And then when it came to then I got my MBA, and then I came back into crypto actually, or came into payments again, but through blockchain and crypto, because I bought Bitcoin early. Back in 2012, 2013, but just kind of sat with it. And then, but it, always watching it, thinking like, where's my place in all of this? And it was really Tezos that changed things, in that I saw, okay, this is an avenue, this is a blockchain where I know this will be around in years to come, given the way that it's governed, given the way that it solves all the problems I had with other ones. And then building on it, it was just really natural to me that finance would live on Tezos, if nowhere else, given the way that it's built. And even if diversified to many chains, definitely Tezos would be a major tentpole. So that's what got me here. That's the oversimplified version of things I did. But yeah, as part of the crowd sale, 2018, we started Tezos LA, and that was the first thing in the community that I did before Tezos actually launched. And then 2019, we announced and started planning USD Tez, which became the StableTech project, which became StableTech, and then working with Cryptonomic most closely on that, and everything else, TezX, TezFin. So here we are.
Right on. So that journey, as I said before, has led you to build numerous projects in the DeFi space here in the Tezos ecosystem. Which hopefully we're going to get to a few of them today. But to start us off, can you talk a bit about USD Tez and its place in the Tezos ecosystem?
Sure. So USD Tez, that was one of the first tokens ever created on Tezos, let alone the first stablecoin, USD stablecoin, and let alone fiat matching price coin on Tezos. So I think TZBTC was the only one that beat us out by a couple months for us, because that is a stable coin, but stable towards the price of Bitcoin. But yeah, we were community created, used the very early FA12 standard. But to me, I spent a long time thinking of what kind of stable coin do we want to make. I knew we wanted to make a stable coin, but there were different models. There was the reserve back model, which you could say is basically a stable coin that's connected to a bank account, as Arthur tends to put it. Or you could have an algo coin or a robo coin, however you want to call it, which is collateral backed based on crypto, some growth asset, and then you take a collateral position on that, and you can basically create what's a form of debt, but that form of debt is an instrument that's pegged to a dollar. To me, I like the idea of an algo coin, which we have now with KUSD and UUSD, both very successful on Tezos. But to me, we needed scalability. We needed a lot of liquidity. And what's the instrument that leads to the other stuff? What do people need now? There's a trilemma that's associated with algo coins, which is that you could scale it, have a lot of liquidity. You could have a price pegged to the dollar, and then you can also put in, but you also have to think in terms of the fees that are associated with it, the stability fees. You can't have all three. So you could scale, generally you can't. So like you can scale something to very high. You could keep the price pegged at $1, but you probably need a lot of high stability fee to maintain that. And there are ways there you can kind of get around that too, but those ways tend to necessitate in a reserve-backed coin like USD Tez. And the same thing is true on Ethereum. You look at DAI, which is an algo coin, very successful, huge. But like the biggest liquidity pools, the pools that people will match two piles of funds, like one being DAI and one being another coin, most people would assume, oh, well, that's probably with Ethereum. Probably the biggest pool is between the DAI and Ethereum. No, the biggest pools are with DAI and USDC, DAI and USDT. So that's an instrument that stabilizes even those algorithmically backed stablecoins. They're great because they're decentralized, but you need to have that reserve-backed coin because that's the psychological guarantee to the user that, okay, if everything goes to hell, we can redeem this. So that's the place of USD Tez, and we've been running it continuously since 2020. I think we're about, in a couple of weeks, it'll be the 3rd year anniversary of the launch. We've been able to use that as an instrument for TezX, which was the first version of it, which was a decentralized cross-chain bridge, P2P bridge for asset swaps between different chains. You could also for TezFin, of course, now, which we've been launching, and now we're just pending a security audit, which is going very well. And when that launches, I believe that all of Tezos DeFi will start to scale, but really all of Tezos token economy, all the asset economy will scale, because that really is the cornerstone and the engine that drives scalability in any economy, not just in DeFi. So yeah, that's basically, that's USD Tez and its kind of place. It was very early on. It lives in everything. I think it's pretty boring compared to the other stuff, because but that's the point. It's meant to be boring
but important.
Yeah, that was the point. It's very unexciting. It's just meant to be a very dumb instrument, but used a lot and scalable. And so that's basically the aspect. The trade-off there is decentralization. You don't get full decentralization in the way that you would with an algo coin. So that's the counterbalance. So what do we do with that? Like, how do we nullify those risks? Well, for one thing, we have a multi-sig for the contract for the collateral. And now we're partnering, actually, we've partnered with Prime Trust so that we can have a US licensed custodian in the mix there. And then that way, through that partnership, we can extend our offerings accordingly. And also with just even the reserve itself, what we've had has been a diversified reserve. We looked at all the different asset-backed coins, and we don't care for Tether in that regard, not because there aren't good things and good people working there. It's just we can't have the same type of quote unquote guarantee in the way that we have with USDC and other stuff, or GUSD or TUSD or PAX or even BUSD, in which they have US licensed custody. There is a regulatory body. I think with USDC was the latest evidence of this, in that where they had their custody, a large amount of it was with SVB. And that went belly up. It was one of the biggest bank collapses in history. But what happened? The U.S. government stepped in to bail them out. So, and then likewise, the price didn't even really depeg that much, because people were so confident that there will be a way out of this. It's too American not to be. It's too big to fail, which is not a great way of looking at things. Again, this is the problem with centralization. But in terms of trust and expectation, which is the name of the game in this regard, that's what ended up happening. But no one's coming to bail out Tether. You think someone's going to bail out Tether? No, it's not going to happen. So yeah, so we have a diversified reserve between those different assets, and now we're looking to expand to a fiat cash reserve as well. Maybe the weight between them, or maybe moving fully to that. That depends on what's going to happen over the next several weeks and months in our process, but we'll announce that when it happens. Definitely for scale, if you want to infinitely scale, it can't be dependent on, as large as these stablecoin reserves are for other coins, there's more cash out there. But by the transitive property, people do trust, and that's why USD Tez has been able to keep such an excellent peg in any condition. And you don't have to worry about it depegging and spiraling out, which is often the case with algo coins. Thankfully, we haven't had that. We haven't had a spiral event in the Tezos coins. I believe in those teams that build KUSD and UUSD. But if an exploit happens, it happens. Or not even just an exploit. There could be macro events that lead to it, and nobody wants this stuff to happen until it happens, and we're like, oh, how did we not let this thing happen? That's where we are.
So speaking of which, like we're obviously in a bit of a strange moment in the ongoing history of blockchain technology right now, with numerous players in the space like shuttering their US operations. I'm really curious, as a US based blockchain builder and innovator, what's your take on the implications of that trend and what it means for our industry? Like, would a shift toward U.S. regulatory compliance be a better approach?
It's what we've seen, I think, over the last couple months, I'd say, especially, has been a lot. Yeah, closing down of operations, U.S. operations, and also those that did not close down their U.S. operations maybe closed down certain aspects of their operations that they didn't want, or a certain regulatory body said, okay, we need to rein all this stuff in. The way I see the regulatory moves happening is that it's just to say, okay, everybody stop right now, because we need to figure out how we're going to categorize all this stuff. If we're going to have licenses, okay, we'll figure out the licenses for some staking operation, or what's the threshold where they would need a license, or or whatever else anyone wants to do. So, but at this point, it's just okay, everybody stop so we can figure this out. Which other nations have done in the past. We saw China do that. But ultimately, I don't think U.S. regulators want to see American innovation leave. I think they want to keep it here. I think definitely the tax revenue that would come from that would be beneficial to the economy. They don't want to see that go overseas. And they want America to lead and keep innovation moving. And I mean, the case with the internet, even, like there's very little regulation coming out for internet matters, not until, there was the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, but even then it took another, I think, 10 years before there was any kind of a sales tax for e-commerce. I mean, up until like almost 2010, I think it's still in places you there was just no tax on Amazon, anything, just zero tax across the whole nation. It's like, that's crazy. It's like they have all this benefit already. But the reason why is they didn't want to start putting shackles on this innovation. They wanted America to kind of grow and have this place in the world, and also just learn, a generation to come in to say, okay, here's how we can start to regulate in a way that's fair, that's not stymieing too many, but it's ultimately better for everyone. So I think that's the way things will go. When it comes to, say, USD Tez, I think a couple things, and this is also where Tezos can come to shine. One of the other advantages of USD Tez is the fact that it's only on Tezos. We're not planning to issue on multiple chains.
Yeah.
I remember, if you look at the Arthur's TezDev talk back in Paris, he talked about this idea of a reserve-backed stablecoin, and if there is a chain split, which is the risk in a hard fork on other chains. We don't have that in Tezos. We don't have that risk, not in any reasonable way, because of on-chain governance. That's the point. Well, then you have two chains, each saying we're the chain that's the successor of the previous chain that parented both of us. The other one is a fraud. We're the actual one. And all the assets have come to here. Well, which chain do you honor? Which chain do you say, okay, we'll redeem one for one? You can't do that. And then I think also when it comes, so that's one example, but what about for an institution, a financial institution, and that level of risk is just completely untenable to their actuaries. JP Morgan, after the Ethereum merge, which was actually a hard fork, but we call it a merge for whatever reason, that led to some splits in the community. For a while, there was that ETHW, the proof of work chain that kept going. It's still going on, actually. And there actually were a lot of NFT marketplaces that said, yeah, you can sell your proof of work version Bored Ape here. It's for a fraction of the price, but like there's an incentive to say, hey, if this thing kind of takes off, I could make some money. It never really got enough traction, but it did alert JP Morgan, where they put out a memo. You could search for this, where they said where they were concerned about the divisions in the community for that very reason. You can't put trillions or quadrillions of dollars on a blockchain of derivatives and all that with this type of risk. It doesn't make any sense. Even if there's a 2% risk of an asset split, a contentious hard fork, that 2% risk, that is enough to put their actuary predictions under the line, where it's like, no, we can't do this. You don't have that with Tezos. So there's a trust in the provenance and of this as an asset layer that matters so much. And I think US regulators are going to appreciate that the transparency and the provenance lines up, let alone all the other advantages from verification. And it's like, this is going to make their job easier, not harder.
This is the next thing that I wanted to ask you about, because along with US regulatory compliance, at least in theory, comes institutional participation. And I'm wondering, can you talk a bit about why regulatory compliance and institutional participation are important to the continued growth of the Tezos ecosystem?
Yeah, and I think this tends to spark two different schools of thought. There's the school of thought of we need to be inviting to the institutions. Let's do things their way. Let's bring them in slowly into crypto blockchain technology. There's the other school of thought, which is no, forget about that. Let's throw that out the window completely. Who cares what they do? They'll come to us or we'll buy them. Let's do everything in our way, decentralized and all of that. In the end, it's a little of both. I mean, there's always a little bit of user experience that has to come to. Otherwise, we do everything we do through command line interface, and we wouldn't make any accommodations for anybody at all, just so we can be so purist about it. I mean, that's an extreme. I know that's not the same thing. I'm just using an extreme example to make a point before somebody bites my head off. But yeah. So I mean so we have to kind of go and push and pull in both directions. But in the end, there will be this homogenization of it all, I believe. When that happens, I think it will happen when institutions realize, oh, they don't need these differences they classically had to do what they wanted to do or get what they wanted. Same thing with regulatory bodies. And in fact, by doing it this other way, it makes their job and their life a lot easier. This is the optimal way to do it. And the legacy way is just because it's legacy. So that realization will come to be, and I think that also helps with generational shifts, also help with that. But then ultimately, if there's money to be made, if there's a strong ecosystem and there's a strong platform, and there are people who trust in it, you will see maybe not the largest financial institutions, but the mid-level, the small ones, the ones who are looking for an edge, they will be the ones to climb into it first and say, okay, if this thing does well, we don't have a hell of a lot to lose, but if this thing does well, we could be on top. We could beat our largest rivals out there, and then some. And that's how disruption actually happens. It's people who are, in kind of a relatively low position looking for that edge that's going to disrupt things. So I think we're getting faster and faster towards that outcome. But what the resistance and the frictions, these are kind of just, they're growing pains, and that's part of the creative destruction. The disruption is happening at such a rate that people are reacting. But I don't think that should be speaking for the trend or for the whole.
Okay. We had an audience question come through from Hacker Pirate, who asks, what makes StableTech unique compared to other DeFi platforms? Which StableTech, obviously, we haven't talked too much about yet.
Yeah. Well, StableTech's not a platform. It's a consortium that's actually owned by, and I'm not actually a part of it. I say founder in that, founding is not the same as running it or CEO or even being a part of the company. I've actually never been a part of it. So StableTech, which is a subsidiary of the Tezos Stablecoin Foundation, which we're now augmenting that Tez Stablecoin Foundation, however you want to call it, and which is a non-shareholder foundation. And in a way, this is like how you do a DAO in an off-chain manner. Since there's a true non-shareholder foundation, and not every jurisdiction allows that, but we found one that did, then nobody owns this. So you have this consortium, this company that's owned by a non-shareholder foundation, so nobody owns the equity here. But what StableTech does is it contracts with my company is a wealth chain, Cryptonomic, and then other Pirates Labs, Yellow Tech, one of Draper Gordon Holm. It can and raise funds as well based on its own token issuance for something in the future to come that would be able to reward all of this. Of course, now none of these platforms have a governance token, but yeah, so that's how that operates, and that's you'll see that a lot probably in different the DeFi world, and on every platform there is that kind of connectivity. That's also what keeps it much more decentralized as well. But the three different branches that we've seen and we've launched thus far for StableTech has been StableTez, which is the stablecoin project, and we have a portal coming out for that, a new portal coming out for that, for USD Tez, ETH Tez, and BTC Tez very soon. It's been a long time coming, but that's gearing towards launch. We got some certifications for that very recently, so that's good. TezX, which is the exchange, and there are some updates coming up with that as well. And then TezFin, which is the lending platform, and that's where we're the security audit. We're just pending on that. And then there's also more to come on that end as well. So that's how that operates, yeah. So that's why I think more in terms of the products that come out as opposed to like what are the companies behind it and whatever, because that's really kind of the point. Nobody cares about like this kind of back-end corporate structure to an equity that isn't owned by anybody. Yeah, so that's how that is.
Makes sense. Super interesting stuff so far. I'm excited to learn a bit more. But before we get into the nitty gritty, are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
Sure. Good.
Okay. Just before we do that, we do have $100 in USD Tez to give away today. Today's keyword for those who are interested in claiming that prize is !TezFin, TezFin. Enter the keyword !TezFin in the live stream chat, and Nightbot will randomly select today's winner, who will announce before the end of the stream. Okay, now, Kevin, it's lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers, and this is just for fun so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Yes.
Simpsons or Family Guy?
I have to give it to Simpsons because that's what I was a kid with. But a lot of affection for Family Guy. Rick and Morty. That's my answer, actually. But I'd say the Matt Groening era of The Simpsons. That's what I'd say.
Fair. Pizza or sushi?
Pizza, of course.
Movies or video games?
Movies.
Is this real life or are we in a simulation?
My heart wants me to say it's real. We are in base reality, but mathematically, we are most definitely in a simulation.
True or false? Money buys happiness.
False.
Name one thing.
State of mind.
Go ahead.
State of mind. Happiness is a choice. It's a state of mind.
It helps, though. Name one thing you absolutely want to do before you die.
Wow. That's a rough one. I'd like to visit every country, at least once.
It's a great answer.
Yes.
The last place you traveled was?
New York. I was there for NFT NYC and the Tez Art Connect. Cool. So, yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
In 5 words or less, how would your best friend describe you?
Optimistic, energetic. No, intense. That could be one.
Okay.
Yeah.
3's fine.
Depends who you're asking. Depends what their flavor is. Everyone's opinion of you is going to be relative to their own norms. So you find the people you love, and he'll love you, and then you'll be happy.
Perfect. And finally, what's your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Oh, listen to the rain. That's the best ASMR for me. Natural sound of rain. I can't listen to a recording of it because it's just too like, I don't know. I constantly reminded that I'm listening to a recording, but the natural, it's just so comforting.
I like that experience inside a tent when I'm camping, when it rains on the tent.
Yeah.
Excellent answers. This concludes the
Hey.
TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. Now that we've talked about USD Tez, I'd like to learn a bit about some of the other things that you're working on. TezX, for example, which is the first P2P Tezos cross-chain bridge, which was released into the wild a while back.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what impact TezX has had on increasing liquidity in the Tezos ecosystem since you rolled it out?
Yeah, and we're gonna roll back to that aspect of TezX pretty soon. What we needed was a like an app where people could actually like just a good UX app that people could add liquidity and all that stuff. But the product itself worked great. What TezX did is it was the first ever decentralized P2P cross-chain bridge. There was no intermediary at all. And when we had the first big wave of growth in Tezos DeFi, which was when Plenty started to grow, summer 2021, and that was when the yield farms and everything. That's when we had a tremendous amount of activity on TezX because for one, also ETH's gas prices were very low at the time. And that was one of the hurdles people had before that because you had to pay ETH gas prices to do those swaps from an Ethereum coin to a Tezos coin. And so that aided a lot. But yeah, it was able to get a lot of funds in and out of the Tezos ecosystem very quickly. The reason why that liquidity moved out, it's not, you could say there are a lot of reasons for it, but really what it comes down to, and one thing we were able to do is not just for the people who are moving out, but also the people who would redeem their USD Tez and ETH Tez. At one point, about 50% of the TVL on Plenty were USD Tez and ETH Tez. They would say it's like if there was a place for me to park my Tez or park the USD Tez or ETH Tez in Tezos, I would do it if there's an Aave or a compound. But since there's not, I have to move it out. And that's very much like the case that we had known, but it was very confirmational that like, yeah, it's all about a lending system. DeFi, really the heart of any DeFi ecosystem, what will scale TVL, it's not more apps or more interesting apps per se. It's first you need to have a scaled lending system. If you look at Ethereum or any DeFi platform or any DeFi ecosystem, they are about the size that Tezos DeFi is now or has been before they added a lending system themselves and before that scaled. But the same is also true of any economy. Forget about just DeFi. It's not just a trend that's been repeated in DeFi. Ever since the Dutch Golden Age, we look at the 1700s, they were the first to figure out that, okay, we have a system of courts and police. We can make loans to each other. We can borrow money at scale and systematically to build businesses, to expand enterprises. And bet on the future being better than the present, that we'd be able to pay off our debts. And people would be willing to lend because it's like, well, if they don't pay up, we can seize their collateral. We have these police, we have these courts, they can do that. And then that rippled all over the world. And that's what led to the industrial age. Which led to the information age and everything we have today. So really the pace of the acceleration of human innovation was a result of having a lending system which created this entire financial economy globally. So right now Tezos is this grand economy without that heart that it needs. So once that happens, I believe everything else, things that we built, but also other DeFi platforms out there in Tezos, they will scale tremendously as well, just by extension of it. And also the NFT world, of course. I mean, this is the commerce sector of our economy, of the Tezos economy right now. It's mainly NFT. So Object, FX Hash, Tea, Versum, others, they like those, first of all, those marketplaces, they can put their revenue in somewhere on chain that can grow with interest and make available funds for borrowing. Borrowers will be able to buy more NFTs at higher prices, more of them, because they're not spending their Tez. They don't have to. They can just borrow against them if they believe that the price of what they're buying or one of the things they're buying will increase over time and they can pay that off, then it just makes sense. Of course, you'd buy it on credit. And then that gives more money to the artists, and then the artists can put more money into the lending pools because they can grow on interest, which provides more liquidity so that borrowers can buy more. And then you have a multiplication of the economy. That's how it works in every economy, but that's how it'll likely play out on Tezos. But we will have that tremendous growth. To me, there's no doubt about it. It's that, and I'm not saying this because we built TezFin. We built TezFin because we believe this. We know this as economic fact, just the truth of economics. So yeah, that's really the key.
Well, we've had another audience question come through, which is a good follow up to that, which is, what are the challenges to making these platforms start gaining traction?
Yeah, it really is that last piece that we need. It's a scaled lending system. So what we're waiting on now to open the floodgates, and for many of the larger investors that have come, we haven't really promoted TezFin at all. We put out we had the first launch back in August, so that was when the beta came out, but now it's pending security audit. So we're mostly done that, and after that, then we can feel like it's okay. Gates are open. Everybody come in. I think that's a good courtesy as well. So yeah, we're just really excited for that. It's been a really long time. It's really all we focused on for most of what we focused on for the last 2 years. So yeah, and we had to keep rebuilding it, by the way. That's kind of the problem. Every time we had a protocol upgrade, we basically had to just rebuild the whole thing. And some of them were really like monumental protocol upgrades we've had in the last couple years, especially in the last year. So having to, when views came in, it's like, all right, we built it all from the ground up. Yeah, that's kind of that's sort of the blessing and the curse of Tezos. It's like the blessing is that you get all these upgrades every 3 to 4 months. The curse is it's like you have to accommodate them and make sure everything is up to spin. So, but in the end, I think it's the best thing for the ecosystem.
Okay.
Yeah.
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'm wondering if I can get you to delve a little bit deeper into it. If we acknowledge that there exists currently an important gap between the world of CeFi and the world of DeFi, should we in the decentralized camp be looking for ways to bridge it, or should those two approaches sort of remain at odds with each other forever?
Yeah. So I think what we're going to see continue, like what I was saying before, but I'll expand on it a bit more. Like the world of CeFi has been, and will continue to move into DeFi because they don't want to miss out either. Historically, whenever we've seen any technological disruption, from Telegram to phone lines to the internet, fax machine, everything, finance is the industry that picks up on it first and makes use of it first. That was true with stock tickers, which like the use case of the Telegram, like long before many others, phone lines, all of that, the fax machine, Ray Dalio's book. So like, to me, the floodway, the sort of waterfall moments are going to happen as well. But at the same time, when the institutions that I talk to, there's just so much legacy pressure, but also the uncertainty that comes with regulatory. That's why they look towards permission systems. And one thing that I thought was interesting, but it got cut off because their company was, the way they managed it, collapsed. Celsius, what they were planning to do was to have a centralized lending system, permissioned and all of that, but that tapped into the decentralized pools. So it was sourced with that, and there was this relative intermediary that would make the institutions feel happier, and then they could come in the way that they feel sort of better about it. But so I think accommodating matters because it's where the money comes in. And we don't really have to worry too much. Like, it's not going to stay that way in the most locked up, most connected to the legacy systems in the past. No, just innovation doesn't allow for that. We tend to leapfrog things, and even the instruments that we want to be able to employ, they're just not. They're not really possible in a centralized manner. Like it takes having these decentralized networks and these to be able to enable them in these programmatic ways. Like everything starts with just mimicking what you have in the centralized world. And it's like, okay, this is like a stock, this is like a bond, this is like a, but then you get to the point where like, no, we can do things with this technology in real time, 24/7, without having like teams of people verifying something in buildings all over the world. Instead, you have just math and this blockchain network that just does it. Well, then now you can think outside the box and really take in what can we do now that we couldn't do before. And then that's going to come in, and it goes hand in hand with doing it in a disrupted fashion that we'll start to see more financial institutions pick up on it. But we're so it'll be interesting to see. I think we'll have a lot of growth on the Tezos front now. I think the message that we should be channeling to financial institutions and any institution is this aspect. And on the call yesterday, where what was that? Was it called the Thai Mason Edwards? I'm so glad he mentioned it with asset splits. That is so key. That is such a key element. We can talk about on-chain governance, and how great it is, but also what it prevents from happening, and what are the benefits that it enables. So it's not just ethos. There's a practical element here that is just absolutely conducive for institutional involvement. But we should be talking about that more. You will not have asset splits on Tezos because of the way that it's governed. This is very much something that everybody can do. But yeah, just in general, let people know what people need to know about Tezos. That's it.
Okay. So I've heard rumors that you have some Tezos layer 2 plans in the works, including an Arbitrum on Tezos called Nextez. How much at this point, how much can you tell us about that project?
Very little. So yeah, we'll have more on it soon, and more public, and start to build community around that. But I think it's really interesting, and one of the better parts of Tezos being quote unquote behind. And then we launched as a blockchain much later than other blockchains as well, and the token standard came out years later. We haven't really had tokens for very long, let alone now we're talking about layer 2s. So we get to look at the past platforms and the current platforms that had launched, and look at the benefits, their mistakes. Definitely, we've already come up with many things that are corrective of some of the mistakes that we've seen on those platforms, like in Arbitrum, like what you've seen with Liquid and Blockstream and all that. And then there's things you can do with Tezos because of Tezos that they couldn't even dream of. We'll get to that point, and definitely it is something that it's more, I think, frictionless for financial institutions to know that, like, oh, okay, so you're here for us too. Okay, good. It's not just some thing by the roadside, and because I think for many it's still like a guy in a suit getting out of a limo and then going to some junkie or on the side of the street to make a deal or something. Like, it's just kind of a they're viewing it that way, which is completely like, wait a minute, that's not what this is. This is very professional, very high end. You're not have to worry about, just because you hear things doesn't mean that's what it is. Check your privilege, man. But it is the reality that is the case. And I think if it sort of lubricates the drive to come in, that's great. But eventually, I think both worlds will converge. Just like in even a cultural disruption, like high culture and low culture become this thing called folk culture. And the same thing will happen, I think, with just our economic institutions, and finance is a huge sector of that. And I think if you look at I think they've done things in a very great way in that manner. We were talking about something else, talking about NFTs. Because they had a very interesting task, which is take all these old institution, Warner Music, the Recording Academy, like, oh my God, like these are like Warner Music, that's a third of the music industry, and they have a preferred partnership.
Sports Illustrated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but for that was like with the Sports Illustrated, that's when they added Polygon as a chain, and that's because whoever was in charge of Sports Illustrated of this, they really wanted Polygon. So they had to kind of balance things out between their own ethos and where they built, like, because everything is like the heart of what they have is on Tezos, but also being a multi-chain platform as well. But what has that done for us? It's like, well, you know what? One of like doing things the way that they do, they paid for the development of Taya. They bankrolled Tez tools to save Econunk, and both when we had Econunk.art for a while, and then even that transition to Taya as well. So like that's a great thing. I mean, that was kind of the advantage. So that's something that people thought of as very centralized, but fueling decentralization and the growth of that. and how they continue to move, and even in the technology on the back end, like how they do have everything is built on Tezos, but and people can use it in a decentralized manner, but the purchasing and whatnot, the marketplace, it comes in a manner that's more geared towards regulatory compliance. It's a very difficult challenge. It's so much easier when you're one way or the other, but they've been able to do it, which is awesome. And they're a StableTech partner as well. Yeah, I should disclose that.
So just sort of one last thing I wanted to get to as we're coming to the end here. There was obviously a fair amount of buzz around decentralized finance as an important, or even maybe the important game-changing, like real-world application for blockchain tech. We had that buzz at one point, but it seems to have died down to a large extent since then. It sounds like you very much are still a believer in DeFi's potential to change the world of finance. What do you think has held DeFi back from sort of reaching its promise?
I don't know if it's been held back. I think we tend to look at the peaks and where we are now, and we think, oh, look at this massive collapse. But you're looking at just right now, if you look at DeFi Llama, we have $50 billion total value locked in general. In the beginning of 2021, so we're talking like it was less than just 2 years ago. We're talking it was less than $1 billion. We're like $500 million, and everything just skyrocketed when you saw the scale of the lending platforms, and in particular the incentivization for scale that Compound had added in May of 2021. More stuff to look at for people, but yeah, like the growth has been tremendous. And just because we were at maybe 100 billion at one point, because there was this early exuberance, it doesn't mean that we're collapsing. No, the long-term trend is moving upwards. So that there's too much opportunity. People will not just abandon this thing. There's massive growth to be had, and we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And I think there's enough people and enough capital out there that are acting on it that we'll continue to see a steady rise. For Tezos, it's the lending system, period. When we have a scaled TezFin, we'll have a scaled DeFi economy, we'll have a scaled TVL on Tezos, and we'll have just a scaled overall NFTs, the overall token economy as well. So, and then that'll even create demand pressure on the price of Tez. You can, it's not the only factor, but it is a very good factor as well.
So it sounds like you really feel like having that lending system in place is the key to unlocking DeFi's potential.
Absolutely. On a pool-based lending system like Compound or Aave, a scaled pool-based lending system like Compound and Aave, that's been the key throughout every DeFi ecosystem. Lending and borrowing in general, that's been the key to every financial ecosystem, even in the TradFi world for hundreds of years. It's just the total sense here, total mathematical sense. And don't take my word for it. Go and look at those other ecosystems, see when they scaled, how they scaled, what the factors were, and the proportion of the lending pools relative to the overall TVL. You'll see that's the reason. I think it's important to keep emphasizing this because for people who don't know, I think a lot of random ideas come into, which are not bad. I mean, they're not necessarily things that would necessarily hurt. I mean, they're good ideas. It's not, those aren't the crux of the calculus. We have everything else. We have these great algo coins, which are so critical to the economy with KUSD and UUSD. Good. We have these great dexes with Plenty and Kipu Swap. InstaRaise is launching pretty soon. And then we got Vortex and so many others. Even back in the days of Dexter, the first Dex ever on Tezos, like it did pretty well. I mean, relative to where we are now. I mean, the TVL was not too far away. So there's a hunger, there's an appetite out there. It's just, this is the one component that's missing. And by the way, it affects all the other components tremendously. I mean, it's a night and day difference. Otherwise, what happens when there is no lending system, the amount of liquidity, the amount of wealth that's within that economy, whether it's traditional finance or DeFi, it either stays the same or it shrinks, because ultimately it's just how much like you're keeping from spilling off, and ultimately more and more spills off. So the ability to retain it, to kind of plug that hole in the barrel and just let it fill up and grow and grow and grow, it's lending. That's the anchor. That's the engine that makes growth happen.
Okay.
As
We could dive much deeper into that, but unfortunately we've run out of time and we're at the end here. Before we close off, I'd like to announce the winner of the $100 worth of USD Tez that we're giving away. Today's winner is Mr. Reef Noob. Congratulations, Mr. Reef Noob. To claim your prize, just email us at social@tezoscommons.org. We'll request a screenshot for verification that you're the account owner and get your shiny new USD Tez over to you just as quick as we can. For those who missed out today, we remind you there are awesome giveaways to be found frequently here on the TezTalks live stream. So keep tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contact can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks. We'd love to hear from you. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks building out cutting-edge DeFi infrastructure projects here in the Tezos ecosystem and keeping Tezos at the forefront of the Web3 revolution. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or plug before we sign off here?
Let me add that we're targeting the next few days to inject a protocol governance proposal, just an amendment for 100,000 Tez to be issued to Tezos Africa Foundation. They lost their funding for this cycle. To fund the next 12 months, what they applied for was a $100,000 grant, which was denied by Tezos Foundation. But they've been operating for many years. They have a very strong a network of chapters. Nelly has just done an incredible job. Same with Vicentia. But the details will come out on that. I'll probably put that on Agora pretty soon. So hopefully the protocol, this is the Nairobi proposal after all. So hopefully we can get something in there to help them out. So look for that.
All right, then. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on the TezTalks live stream. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Kevin Mehrabi, founder of StableTech and WealthChain. Now let's go change the world of finance.
Yes. Thank you so much.